lesson for this, the 18th Sunday after Pentecost, is taken from the 17th chapter of Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through in the middle between the region of Samaria and the region of Galilee. And as he entered a village, 10 people with leprosy approached him. And keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And when he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went on their way, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, glorifying God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And this one was a Samaritan. And Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and to give glory to God except this foreigner?" And then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has saved you." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
The assembly is seated. So the text in our gospel lesson for today is oftentimes thought about in 2 ways. The first is to make it a moralistic story about the importance of giving thanks to God, and the second way is to focus particularly on the relationship between faith and healing, which gets us sometimes to be thinking about, well, okay, so if I'm not receiving the healing that I think I should be, then maybe I don't have enough faith. Both of these ways of thinking about the text require us to make assumptions about the text that the text itself doesn't actually fully support. And that also they kind of narrow the text, and we miss some things in this text that are very powerful. And so I'd like to share with you this morning a couple of ways that we can think about this text, that we don't have to make assumptions about the text. The first is one that's actually maybe a little bit more subtle, and we might not always catch it because it's something that has to deal with translation. And so there are some translations that would say the 10 lepers approached Jesus. Okay? And some other translations would say the 10 people with leprosy. Okay? 10 people with leprosy approached Jesus. So now you might be saying, okay, so what's the importance there? Okay, so the difference is in how the rest of the story unfolds. So 10 people with leprosy approach Jesus. And Jesus sees them. And Jesus has mercy on them. Jesus does not see them based on a label that society places upon them because of their illness. Jesus sees these people who happen to have leprosy. Likewise, Jesus doesn't see them based on a label placed on them by society because of the region that they live. Now, we only know, of course, that one of them is a Samaritan. We don't know who the other 9 are, whether all of the 9 are Galileans, or whether they're all Samaritans, or whether there's a healthy mix between the two. We don't know. We don't know. We just know that one is a Samaritan. But Jesus doesn't see that one just as a Samaritan. The fact that the person's a Samaritan doesn't happen and become important until after the healing has taken place. But Jesus doesn't see them based on some sort of label that is placed on them. Jesus sees them as people who are in need of mercy, and Jesus has mercy on them. Jesus has mercy on them. Likewise, Jesus doesn't see you based on some sort of label that is placed on you by society. Jesus doesn't see you based on your depression or anxiety. Jesus doesn't see you based on some sort of physical illness. Jesus doesn't see you based on what other people say about you when they pass you in the hall, or when you're at work, or when you're in the grocery store. People doesn't see you based on your social status, or whether you're a Republican or Democrat. Jesus doesn't see you based on your sin. Jesus sees you as a beloved child, as someone who is in need of mercy, and Jesus has mercy on you. Another thing with this text is that it is It's a healing text, but it's different than a lot of other healing texts that we get. Because you have these 10 people with leprosy who approach Jesus and they say, "Lord, have mercy on us." But then Jesus doesn't heal them right away. Jesus doesn't declare to them, "You are healed," and all of a sudden, boom, they're healed. Jesus doesn't even tell them to expect that. In the future, Jesus doesn't pray over them. Jesus doesn't lay hands on them and heal them. Jesus simply says, "Get up and go. Show yourself to the priests." And so there you go. And then this is the amazing part. They do. They get up and they go. They don't know what to expect. They trust that Jesus is going to do something for them, but they don't know what it is. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what's going to happen. But they get up and they go to show themselves to the priest, because the only way that they're going to be able to go back and rejoin their community, the only way that they're going to be able to return home, return to their jobs, return to their families, and become a participating member of society again, is if they go and show themselves to the priest. And the priest essentially is going to take them, he's going to strip search them essentially, and check every inch of their body to make sure that there isn't even one spot of leprosy left on them. And then the priest would declare them clean, and they could go back to their family, they could go back to their community, their jobs. And they get up and go. But then when they get up and go, they still have the leprosy. They haven't been healed yet. So getting up and going, that's an act of trust. That's an act of faith on their part. That the one on whom they have asked for mercy is going to show them mercy. Even though they don't know what to expect. And when that act of mercy happens, when they are, in this case, when they are healed, they don't recognize it in the moment that they are healed, they recognize it after the fact. While they are going, Jesus heals them. And at some point, they recognize it. We know specifically the one who ends up being a Samaritan. We hear about him that when he saw that he was healed, past tense, when he saw that he was healed, then he was able to give thanks and glory to God. They received healing on the way, and when they recognized the healing, then they were able to give thanks and glory to God. This is the way that it is for us. There are times, oftentimes, most of the time actually, when we go to God and we ask for mercy, we've got an expectation in our head of what mercy means, or we've got a specific kind of mercy in mind that we want God to show to us, that we want God to give to us. But God doesn't always give us the mercy that we expect, or in the way that we expect it, or in the way that we want it. But God does have mercy on you. And so rather than coming and asking God for mercy and then sitting there and doing nothing and waiting, twiddling our thumbs, waiting for God to receive the mercy that we want in the way that we want it in the timeline that we expect it to happen, instead, we come to God, we ask for mercy, and then we get up and go, trusting the one in whom we call on to have mercy is merciful. And then while we are on our way, God is merciful to us. God shows us mercy. And now it might not look like what we expect. But God is merciful. We do receive mercy. And sometimes in that moment, when God is giving us mercy, we're not able to see it in that moment. Sometimes it takes a little while, and we have to look back and reflect and see that, you know what, we have received mercy. And then, having recognized that God is merciful, then we can give glory and praise to God. And this happens to me on a fairly regular basis. There are some days when the last thing I want to do is get out of bed. Now, sometimes coffee is enough to motivate me to get out of bed in the morning a bit. But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes the last thing I want to do is get out of bed, and I'm thinking about all the things that I have to get done, and there's way too much for me to get done in a day. And I'm not feeling very good, whether physically or emotionally. I'd rather just go and run away and try and escape from all of my problems or my issues. But then, when I get to the end of my day, it's an important part of this story. When I get to the end of my day, I look back, I say, you know what? God gave me the strength to get out of bed today. And by the grace of God, I was able to do way more than I thought I was going to. Maybe even to the point that the stuff that I have to do the rest of the week is maybe a little bit more manageable now. And you know what? Even though I felt worthless today, there was still that time when I was able to be present with someone, when God was able to use me to love someone, when God was able to use me to help someone. And you know what? There was that person who showed me that they cared. And you know what? God showed up to me in that person too. And God showed me God's love in that person and in that one. And looking back, I can see that I have received mercy. And then, in that moment, I can give thanks and praise to God, and I can go to bed knowing that God, who has been merciful to me, will do it again. So brothers and sisters, God doesn't look upon you based on terms of some sort of social label. God doesn't look on you based on your brokenness. God doesn't see you based on your sin. God sees you as a beloved child. And God has mercy on you, even if it isn't what we expect and we can't see it in the moment. But the one on whom we call to have mercy is merciful. And if you need a reminder of that, remember the cross. Remember how God was willing to become human in the person of Jesus Christ, and how Jesus taught and lived and suffered and died and rose again so that nothing can separate you from God's love. In Jesus Christ, God has shown God's self to be merciful. God has proven that God's love never fails, that God will never abandon you, and that God's mercy will never be withheld from you. And so, because of that, we can get up and go, trusting that along the way we will receive mercy. Because the one on whom we call to have mercy is merciful. And that is most certainly true. Thanks be to God.